I'm going to start with some questions, but please interrupt me, like raise your hands if you want to ask anything. In the introduction, when we started, you mentioned a very nonchalantly, you mentioned a very strange process for making a film, which is this idea of writing, shooting, editing, and going back to writing, shooting, editing 4 times.
Yeah.
Which is rare, particularly for, maybe it's a process that we can imagine being closer to how an experimental film might be made, or perhaps a documentary, where things develop in the real world and so on.
Yeah.
But it's very strange for fiction for anybody to do a film in this way. And it's not just because I'm interested in the question of process, but also because this process obviously has a very direct impact on what the film ends up being. And not only in more perhaps conceptual terms, but in very practical terms as well. Like you have someone that's pregnant, that then it's not pregnant, that perhaps that also interferes. And anyways, can you talk a little bit about that process and how that is linked to what the film ends up being?
Yeah. So okay, thank you for staying and for having watched the film. Of course, there might be a couple of answers to that. First has to do with something biographical that has to do that I don't live in Buenos Aires, so I come back and forth. So something of that movement goes into the movie. Again, I feel that production is part of the staging, of the mise en scène, and so I integrate that thing. I live in New York, and I go to Buenos Aires to make the movies with these people that I like to make movies with. So there's something about that somehow I make coincide. So in order to be a filmmaker, I need to be flexible on that. Then I also make movies in a very independent way. So this thing of not fully doing everything at the same time makes the economy of the film possible. Because in between one shooting and the other one, I also can collect more money from places, from showing the movies elsewhere, and like accumulating a little money and shoot now and again and so on. And then these very pragmatic things also affect like the creativity of it. Everything is connected. It's not that like money is not creative, or that like my schedule is not allowing me to think things in different ways. I'm someone that has like ideas on how I want things to be, and like and I choose this text, and I choose this way of shooting, and I like moving the camera this way or this other. I like this sort of acting. So I have a lot of things that I kind of like controlling. So I do like that this way of working pushes me, contests me against this like will of control. So this way of shooting this way allows things to happen that I cannot control, and I think that in a movie that's important. That you're not, or at least I don't think of myself as a filmmaker that wants to absolutely have everything in control. So this way of producing helps to have new ideas and keep me in the present tense. That I think that at the end of the day, that's the tense of cinema. That is the present. So things happen. So of course I haven't thought about, I always think that the script always falls a little bit too short on what a movie can be. And so I can write something, and then what reality will always oppose what you write, this will for control. So I like that once I write something and I propose to do something, that reality brings you something different and you need with that. Of course I didn't write that Maria would be pregnant in the movie. That's just something that happened. And that somehow, when that happened, I somehow decided that I was not going to be against something that my friend and the actor of the movie wanted. I'm going to integrate it. I'm not going to be against the pregnancy, the desired pregnancy of this person. I'm just going to work around it. And all of a sudden, I think that absorbing this possibility gave the movie other sort of layers that were more interesting than what I could have written in that sense. Because the idea of having an actor go like auditioning for the role of a nun with a 7-month belly was something quite interesting to see, And so I didn't have to be imaginative. I just had to go with that flow, knit with what was given, work with the things that I have, and allow this wind to somehow curl the possibilities of the movie. And Yeah.
Perhaps you can talk in relation to, just to stay with process for a second, and writing. The films are, not just this one, and other ones are inspired or not based, I don't know how you call it, on Shakespeare comedies. How does Shakespeare come in? Like, do you start with that and then...
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about it?
The first thing is to choose the play. So I can, and I know that I'm going to name the movies after the female heroine. So I always know the name of the movie before even having anything of the movie. But because I choose the play that I'm attracted to, and I've been attracted to Measure for Measure for a long time, because of Isabela, because of those scenes of Isabela with Angelo that are great, or with his brother that also is amazing. And I connect with those scenes. I don't connect with the scenes of the Duke. You know, there's scenes of the Duke that are kind of funny or whatever, very perverse also. I don't connect with the jesters, with the fools in the comedies, or I don't connect with Touchstone in As You Like It. I connect with Rosalind, you know. So the first approach is that I find in the plays and a role that usually is a woman, that I'm attracted to, that I like how it moves. I find that it's a complexity there that I don't find anywhere else, and that I also find a connection between the people that I work with and these people and these roles. And I think that there's something interesting, photogenic, cinematic in seeing these actors working against these lines in a way. So it comes from there. And in the particular case of Isabela, the previous film that I did was Hermia and Helena, based on Midsummer's Night's Dream. That is sort of a very popular, is the most popular play in Shakespeare from the comedies, and somehow very light also. So I kind of liked the change of tone that Measure for Measure was providing to the pot, to my own pot, and this idea that it's a problem play. No, and that brings like a sort of darkness and a weirdness and a crookedness that I felt that I was ready to inhabit for a little while. And so somehow one film reacts to the previous one in a way, for different reasons. And yeah, so that's how I end up choosing this or that. Yeah.
And does the writing of the stories within your films are how do you come, because the stories are different than the original the Shakespeare stories, of course. So when does that come in, or how do you develop that?
From the beginning, in this movie, I knew that, for instance, in Midsummer's Night's Dream, I knew that I didn't want like the actual play, that I was going to neglect the play, that I was going to put it aside. So I chose the role. The main character was a translator, so it was not going to be played. While here I said, let's do the opposite now. Now that I've been so far away from the text, let's go back to the play. And I've never done this sort of rehearsal of casting thing, auditioning. That is a conversation that I've been having with my actors for a very long time. So there were anecdotes and things that were interesting for me to put there to create something with that. So I had this idea of, okay, this play, this character, these scenes, because I want to create this sort of thread line in through all these scenes, these three scenes. And that somehow I think that they create a unity, that I can decontextualize them and put them together, and that something would be able to be followed from these three moments. And then I would think about, okay, what is she doing? Is she a director? Is she an actress? Is she a translator? Is she like, I don't know what? And I thought about going back to acting, because with Maria, is an actress that I've been working for a long time, and the one that I've been working most. In the previous movies, she worked less. Her role was not as important as in my first movies, a little bit because of the family, the children that she had, that made her like less available in a way. So it was a little paradoxical that all of a sudden, in the middle of the production, she had a third child, and somehow that we decided to do the movie, of course, together still, and so I decided the idea of the casting, and the scene in Shakespeare is an interrogation scene, and for some conversations that I had with the actors, sometimes the auditions become that sort of dynamic as well. So there was a nice resonance for me between this power play, between the judge and Isabela and the director and the actors doing an audition. There's a power play there that I felt that was echoing somehow. So that's how it started. And the first thing that I shot was the thing in Cordoba, in the mountains. And I knew the structure comes very early on. I knew that I wanted like 3 moments, you know. And so let's do the first one first. And I don't care about the rest. Let's go do the first, and then by doing the first, we'll find threads that will continue afterwards. And for instance, the line of the stones appeared because she picked up the stones. It was not meant to be, but when she was climbing up, she was picking up the stones. So when I saw that, and I saw from all the material that we shot that those scenes were still there, some other scenes like disappeared, I said, okay, let's pick up this idea and work it around in the next chapters, in a way. And that's how somehow, and like that, many things. Some of these lines disappear, some of them like become stronger, and so on. A little like in music.
Can you talk, if anybody has a question, please.
Yeah, please.
But perhaps you can talk about the audition a little bit more, and this idea of it's very central to the film, and there is something really strange for a filmmaker to make a film about auditions, someone that never does auditions.
Yeah.
Like you've made many films, but you don't do castings.
Yeah.
And so, can you talk about your relationship with castings?
Yeah, of course. I don't do the castings because in Argentina the theater milieu is very big. There's a lot of theater going on. And there's like the Broadway, the off-Broadway, and the off-Broadway. And usually the off-Broadway for me is much more interesting, and many of the people that you've seen are part of that milieu. And it's been years since I've been like going there and seeing people there. And instead of like calling people for an audition, I'd rather go to the theater and see what they do. You see the actual body. You see them actually doing something that they work on. There's something of the audition that might be a little bit synthetic, too superficial, like too reactionary in the sense of having to react very quickly. No, that you're given this and or I don't know. There's a power dynamic that I don't like in an audition. And so I found, as there's so much theater going on, I'd rather go to see them in a theater play or even someone else's movie or short film or whatever. People do things, so you can be curious and look for things. And then also if you go to the play, you can see that play, and maybe they're in another play, so you can go and see them in another play, and then you can meet them afterwards if you're friends of the director of another or from another cast member, and you go out for have drinks or you have dinner, and then you go to a party and you see the people in reality, and then that's how I look at people. And then I say, hey, I'm thinking about this, would you like to? And then we start, no? And then year after year, like that. And then I keep on working with the same people because I think that the bond doesn't exhaust itself in only one take. It's like I'm like a gambler, you know? That I always think that I can win the next. So the same thing with this. I think that, the relationship doesn't get exhausted in one take. And then the auditions, I never do auditions. I still like this dramatic element that appears. I am very close to all these people that are my friends, so I hear things about the auditions that they do and things. We make fun of these situations and so on. So a little bit of what happened in the movie happened to Maria, not precisely, but for me it was very interesting that she worked so much in one audition to get one role, and she goes to the role, she actually played the piano, learned this piece to play the piano, goes to the audition, does the things, thinks that she's great, that she did great, and then she goes out and sees someone and says, she's gonna get it. And that's what happened. No? And actually it's very interesting, something that is not in the movie, but something, because there's no need for everything to be in the movie, but something kind of interesting that she saw that the other actress looked like the director, that there was a resemblance, like a physical resemblance, and that she thought that was going to attract the director. And it did. And that I didn't put in the movie, but because there's no need. But it was interesting. I don't know. It was interesting. This thing of being very high, and all of a sudden immediately that they crush you. I don't know. I thought it was interesting.
Just because I'm gonna forget, but this film, the actresses talk a bit slower than a lot of your films, and I just remembered because you talk really fast, and so I was listening to you like going super fast and thinking, of course, because maybe if you watch some of Matthias' other films, particularly Elmi and Elena.
They talk very fast. I saw it recently.
Like the actresses are going at like faster than you talk right now. Like can you perhaps talk about rhythm in that sense, the rhythm of speech? How do you direct that, and how do you decide that sort of thing?
Yeah. It's a sort of musicality. It's a sort of rhythm. It's like has to do with comedy also. Has to do with Katharine Hepburn. Has to do with has to do with juggling. In order for the balls not to fall, you have to go fast, in a way. You know, if you slow down, if you change the rhythm, the balls might fall. You know, it depends. I'm not an expert in that metaphor, but I like it. But yeah, there's something about the comedy that has to do with a sort of little artifice. That films are not naturalist. They're not like a reflection of reality. So it's a composition, and there's something about the way that I like them to be talking, the articulation of the sentences, the speed, the idea that there's that they would react quickly, like in a way that it wouldn't have the natural pauses for the character to actually think about what the other has said and think what they would answer back. All these tricks of naturalism, I'm not interested in. I like classical comedy. I like the screwball comedy. You know, I went like last week to see Sullivan's Travel from Person Sturges, and they talk very fast, and they're not listening to each other. And it's Peter Brooks that says that comedy has to do with people not listening to each other. No, as tragedy has to do with people not seeing, and melodrama not talking, and that's why the women are like with these expressions and so on. In comedy, people don't listen to each other. No, so that is what produces the screwballing in a way. So yeah, they're not listening to each other really. No, they know because they know the lines already. They read the script. It's not reality. It's not reality. So there's something of that I enjoy, and the musicality for me, and the rhythm with the choreography. I don't know. I like that. But here, after making some movies, also you want to try different things, and there was something for me of becoming too aware of that. So okay, now that we've done this, as a friend of mine, Hugo Santiago, an Argentine director that lived in Paris for many years, said, okay, you've done that, so there's no need for you to do it again. No? So you did it. So the idea of like slowing down, the idea of having a different pace, there was something about the tone of Measure for Measure that allowed me to work a little bit around silence or pauses in a way. The idea of going up the hill, that also produces like, okay, moments of silence. Like naturally the things that I would choose to shoot would help me to slow down. You know? And yeah, so trying a little bit different.
I wanted to change it up a little bit and ask you about place.
Yeah.
And you render landscape
Yeah.
and the modern urban world so vividly.
Yeah.
But yet there's also something that seems very anonymous about it, and that you know, we don't know exactly where we are in history. We don't know really where we are geographically, and so there's a sense of something kind of sealed in a certain way. It's sort of in a couple of the films that I've seen of yours as well, and so. But there's a vividness of it.
Yeah.
And so I'm curious about how you are thinking about place and you know, what we recognize or what we know in history.
Yeah. In regard to place, I think that I like to choose corners, like small, and I like to choose like from small and exhaust the small, the particular, the singular, to choose singularly. This is an avenue that I walk through, no, that has all these like car garages and so on. I'm going to make Agustina walk through this very male street, no, very masculine street. And then, so it's not the most famous street, it's not the most famous avenue, it's not one that you would recognize like this. For instance, when I shot there's a movie that I shot in New York, partly in New York. And I was trying not to make the postcards, you know? So in Buenos Aires, I do similarly. In New York, the challenge was more obvious for the character of the city. But I think that if you see that movie in New York, you wouldn't recognize that much New York either. And I like that because there's so many New Yorks that it's interesting that I allow you to, or no, not allow you, but that I show one segment of it, because the movie is actually shot there, and I'm not intervening much. It's just that I just stayed in the singular and the particular and in the small fragment of it, not being afraid of being narrow in that sense. No, not wanting to give an idea of New York with only one movie in that sense, and allowing for other images of that city to be incorporated to the imaginary construction of that city, whether it is New York or Buenos Aires. And in Buenos Aires, it's a little bit the same. I don't shoot in that many places, but if you know the place, it strikes. And I trust that. I like this sort of intimacy and accomplishment, or how do you say, like complicity with a viewer that all of a sudden knows that fire hose, knows that tree, knows that park, knows that street. And for the rest, I don't think that it's a secret that is keeping you away. It maybe flows differently. And at least, I don't know, I like this idea of getting away from the postcard. I don't know, I live in New York and I don't see the Empire State every day. So why is it that I go and see a movie in New York and the Empire State is always there? I don't experience the city that way. I experience it differently. Well, Buenos Aires is the same. You know, I don't see the typical places in Buenos Aires. I don't see the typical the typical characters of Buenos Aires every day. So somehow I make that cut. You know, I trust that maybe in the combination of everything, like a broader understanding is achieved, but not a complete understanding of the city, because it's something that is beyond, it surpass its representation. I prefer to be singular and how to say, like, I don't know if narrow is not the word, but I rather that the movie doesn't give an impression of a totality of the city, but it gives like if you know that street is pretty much shot. It's kind of a little bit exhausted, not fully, but a little bit exhausted. And in particular in this movie, you don't see that much the city. The city is not that present, to tell you the truth. It's not that very much present, but I think that happens in many of my movies. That there's something about the speech that wins over the city in a way. But when I choose a place, I choose a particular place for particular reasons that I like, and I like to show it as it is. That's why somehow when I make these shots that have all this movement, the movement is organized around the space. So the space is actually determining very much how I stage the shot, because there's a column here, or there's a wall here, or there's a street here, there's the tree is there. So somehow I choose those coordinates in order to do the geometry of my staging. If there would be a different thing in front of it, it would be different. So even though you might not be seeing it, because it's not like you see the whole thing, internally the shot is being determined by these coordinates. So I trust in that sort of composition.
You see the space as a stage. So
yes.
It's an extension of the theater
yeah.
as well. So
yeah.
Because it's very, you were talking about not being control, and so controlling, but you.
But I am. Yeah. It's very much about control, and that's why I try to put myself in a position that will shake me, because if not, I would tend to that sort of control. But I think that a filmmaker that doesn't, I think that cinema has to do with this dance between chance and control. That is not only chance, and it's not only control. It's like it's a movement a little bit like that. But I do believe that I tend much more to the control aspect of things. But yeah. But even that person that goes out with a camera and follows a character just like that is also another way of controlling. You know, it is another way of controlling. But I think that I do enjoy that the control somehow is obvious, that the thing is controlled, because it's cinema. There's a frame. You know, you choose space, how you cut space. You choose a cut in time. You choose. Those who think that they're not choosing, they're lying. And they know that they're choosing. They're more manipulative. But I like this, this balance in a way. But yeah, I do fight a little bit against the extreme control. That is a tendency that I talk with my therapist. Thank you.
I think the essence of my question was already put more eloquently than I could have, but maybe I can have my own perspective and ask you to talk specifically about the photography.
Yeah.
It's a lot of what you were talking about now, but I thought it was a very beautiful film. Also, in terms of the control and the scenes, I was really struck by the alternation between the claustrophobic audition scene and the beautiful, I don't know how else to put it, the mountains, the hills, this sense of openness. So maybe very simply, did you choose especially those mountains? How did that come to you? And how did that influence the photography in particular? And maybe the one more thing is about the colors throughout all of this. I thought it was very beautiful.
Yeah. In regard to place, going back to the idea of place, I tend to do all films in cities, and the previous movie was a film shot in Buenos Aires and New York, two very important cities. So in this thing that I say that one film calls the next one or helps the next one to be, I thought, okay, let's change something. As I'm working in a game of repetition and variation, you have some things continue, the people that I work with, Shakespeare and so on, a certain idea of control, actually. I need to choose other things that will change. So the idea of like shooting landscape that I never did was a nice challenge. Especially because I was thinking about working with a filmmaker that I did a film afterwards, that Lois Patiño, that he works very much with landscape. So I said, okay, I'm going to practice. What Agustina does in the movie, I do also. Like she's practicing in order to do this film in Portugal. It was me who was also practicing in order to shoot like in nature that I've never done before, or not in this way. So I knew that I wanted to exercise like how can I tell a story with a longer shot, in a landscape, in nature. What would be my sort of shots that I would be doing? Let's exercise that. Let's try that. Let's try these unworked muscles in a way, and push me to think differently and continue. So in that sense, that was the first thing that I decided to shoot, the things in Córdoba. And okay, the idea of the big landscape and this and that and the red car and this and then walking and then going up, and then the things that stayed from all that shooting were the ones that I continue afterwards. So I was conscious of the idea of the audition in the enclosed thing, and so when I was editing, I knew this back and forth with the landscapes and the inside, the interacting with another and being alone in this sort of nightmarish audition. And so I was very self-conscious of having that, but in a way that it was the first thing that I shot. So then it was more natural to do the things that I do or I have done before. The idea of the rehearsals, the idea of the audition, the idea of the interiors of the city. And then it's a work, in this film is the film in which I work with Fernando Loque, that is the cinematographer of almost all of my movies. It's a relationship that goes from 2002 onwards, so there's a lot of bond, a lot of trust, a lot of things that we've worked through years after years, so there's something oil there in regard to what we're looking for or in regard to what we want to challenge ourselves in doing. I'm someone that tends to shoot more in medium shots by moving the camera, so all of a sudden I say, okay, let's do something that doesn't move the camera that much, and so on. So it has to do with that bond with Fernando, and also with the actors that understand like playing differently when they're playing in a medium shot or when they're playing a longer shot. That bond of trust built through the years. And then the idea of color also comes from from reading an interview that someone did with Fernando, and Fernando said that usually directors didn't think in terms of color. So it was kind of a provocation. He was talking in general terms, but as I work with him particularly, I said, okay, what does it mean? And I remember also that a student from Pratt came to me and asked me, Matias, I'm interested in color in movies. Would you recommend me films that work with color? And that question actually also made me think like, I don't know. What would that mean to the color? Because of course, colors, it's there and I work a little bit with it, but I'm not like thinking constantly or like a primary element. So I thought, okay, let's work around this concept. And maybe I exaggerated, no? I ended up exaggerating, but I thought about that. And so it was also like a nice invitation for the cinematographer and for the production designer to think with me, to think together about how can we work around the idea of color. I knew that the production designer, Ana Cambre, with whom I work a lot, also many other opportunities, she liked to do something else in these very independent small movies where usually the production center is not that big, it's not much of a challenge. And I knew that she was working as a carpenter and that she was doing things with wood, like furniture. So, okay, this is a movie about an actress, maybe it's interesting that they're doing another little play besides the other thing, and they're building how can you make that? And okay, this idea of like building this decor and this like light trick, no, understanding the difference between color as light and color as pigment. No, and that I could do something with that game, the difference between those two variables. And so we started thinking like together, because I know that both of them like the idea of color. So we researched it a little bit. I was interested in certain artists that are very obvious, that like Joseph Albers, that has talked so much and wrote and thought so much about color, and also about pedagogy that I'm very interested in. I work mainly as a teacher, so I like also things that had to do with pedagogy. So for me, it was interesting to read his way of teaching and his understanding of that activity. And I don't know, James Turrell, and so on. Like that, those are more obvious and there. In kind of a micro way, no. These artists are, well, whatever. So it came like that, the thinking about color.
Final questions, perhaps? Maybe just because we're here, I want to ask, like here at Berkeley, and there's a couple of professors and a bunch of graduate students as well that I can see here. And this film is produced by a film school, by Le Fenoir, where you used to teach in France. Yeah. You teach at Pratt full-time as an associate professor, and you also are the head of a film program at Cinescola in San Sebastian. So like, you teach a ton, and like a 4-3 load on top of things. But so how does that experience of being constantly in the academic
in committees?
How does that?
Well, that's coming next, no? The movie about committees. That I can say a lot.
But how does that
I shouldn't
then reflect in your films, perhaps?
Well, I just said a little bit. Like, for instance, part of my interest in color comes from this student from Pratt telling me this, and not me saying what I'm going to recommend the Kieślowski movies. No, that's too poor as an approach to color. You know, I have to think color differently. Like, what does it mean? And also, Pratt is an art school. It's not NYU. So the idea how it's not that innocent that all of a sudden I make a movie that's a little bit more interested in the plastic things, working in art school where my students go and have to have like classes about color and light and like drawing and so on. And when I'm interacting with the students and they come to me telling me that they do this and that and they integrate these things in their own works, and so somehow it impacts on me. And then I have an office, I have a printer, I use the printer a lot to print my things, and it has helped me. And then Frénois came in late for the post-production. They invited me to go there and be tutoring, and they were part of the co-production because they gave me money in order to finish it at a point where I didn't know how I was going to have money in order to do the post-production. So I was very lucky there. Also, Frénois, it's more experimental, more into documentary, and I'm very much into fiction, but I like the possibility of creating alternative sort of ways to create fiction. So, yeah, they're so embedded together that it's difficult to think them too separately. But I can say that when I started shooting the movie, I didn't know how we were going to finish it. And I was lucky enough to be invited to this place and that they gave me money so I could finish it. So things are a little bit by chance, but also by activity. It's because I'm making that they invite me and that I can put two things together and make them happen. It's also because I can pay my rent with the money that I make in the school, that I can be thinking about doing these silly things with colors that nobody cares, you know, and that I can work with the actors that I want to know, with the actors that would be most convenient to make it I don't know where. No, so it gives me a freedom that I enjoy working in very small scale. These movies are very, very small, but the thing is that everyone puts so much interest in making them and so much of themselves, and we collaborate and we have fun in making them, and it's hard also to make them. Imagine at the moment that Maria told me, oh, I'm pregnant. I was planning, we were shooting in August. We were having a lot of issues that I was rethinking things so that's to shoot a little bit in August, a little bit in December. That was when I was going back. And when I'm telling Maria that maybe we will do the interiors in August and the exteriors in December, Maria looks at me, I see her that she's not talking, and says, Matias, I have to tell you something. I haven't told anyone this, but you should know that I'm pregnant. And she hasn't told anyone, only the father of the baby, no? And because I was planning this sort of shooting, and that, you know, it's also I have my office. In my office, I was doing I had a lot of little essays, how do you say, like, models. I did the decor. I did it in small with the different things, and I was working, and I was painting, and I was doing all the things, all the investigations around color. I did it. I painted the stones, and I put red lights, blue lights. I was doing that all in my office. I had time in my office to do that, and it was great. And I tried things out. I was learning also, and I was entertaining myself, and it was also like a sort of meditation. Also, it helped me to be feeling better also. So yeah, integrated, and then of course the class schedule also organizes my shootings. It's all mixed. So I try to use these limitations that this job gives me in order to serve the movies, so that it's not a problem, but it's actually something that activates the best possibilities from them. You know, there was something at one point that I once did a movie that I did like a heist movie. No, the production style of a heist. I went to Buenos Aires, shot for 13 days, and left Buenos Aires with a movie in my bag. You know, I did that already. Let's try differently. You know, so let's take time. I'm not in a rush. We're not getting any richer, and it's fine. But we're making movies, we're getting together. It's a good excuse to meet with friends, to create something, to rethink things, to challenge myself, and so on. And at one point to finish it and show it. That.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, thank you.
What's the life of this film? Where is it? Or what is the world, the circuits that...
This movie premiered February 2020. So you can imagine what happened. So I finished it. I premiered in Berlinale. It got like a little distinction, which I was very happy. And then as it's not my first movie, I somehow have a path of where I show usually. So the movie starts at first doing that path of festivals that take like 1 year, for instance, even with the pandemic. No, but it was weird though. Because it was online, depending where, and Vienna was not online, this was not online, Mexico was not online. And then the thing that goes secondly is that you try to meet distributors in each of these places. So with the years, I have distribution in Argentina, and I have distribution in Mexico, I have distribution in the US, and that's somehow I'm here. That's why I'm here in a way, because there's a U.S. Distributor, the Cinema Guild in New York. Same thing in Spain, that I have someone that moves them around in Spain, and now in France there will be one. It's very like, I don't know if you say like the path of an ant. You know, it's very small, but year after year I win like a little territory. You know, Japan, the movies show in Japan. Who would have thought that movies that cost less than $50,000 would be able to show in Japan?
But they're in theaters?
Yes. Yeah, not with the Avengers. But in these places, yeah, they go through cinemas. Yeah, like maybe like museums, but they run for a week, they run for 2 weeks, they run for a month. In each place is differently, you know. But in these places that I mentioned, somehow they show. Some of them at first not, but year after year the movie gets shown more. In this case, it got the pandemic. So for instance, I premiered in Lincoln Center. It was one of the first movies to open. And it didn't do that amazing, no, because the people were not going yet. I remember, for instance, very clearly, usually when in the premiere night, the cinema would be sold out. And it was not. There was people, it was good, but it was not sold out. A movie that I know that won't sold out everything, but it was hard. It was August 2021. Movies just all reopened, and it took time. I went to see Cry Macho of Clint Eastwood on a Friday night, the night of the premiere, and it was empty in Union Square. And it's Clint Eastwood, not Matias Piñeiro. I know the difference. Friday night of the premiere in Union Square, empty. It was frightening, the experience. Then in the middle of the screen.
The movie, yeah.
So, sorry?
On top of the movie. Yeah.
That's another thing. That's another thing. But still, if you say if Clint doesn't make it, what's for the rest? But that's another problem. So yeah, it's very slow. It's very narrow, but little by little, no. And I was just talking with Nico and Fernando, a friend from many years, that I think that Isabela was not that much shown. I think that the pandemic made it that it took time to show it, and then we were showing it was the beginning. So it's one of the movies that was not that much shown because of the U.S. distribution. All of a sudden, we get some streaming services like Movie that is specialized in more independent work. So all of a sudden, that the thing that I have a U.S. distributor helps a little bit for these very small movies to move a little bit. So at Movie, you would have some of my films, for instance. So because it's in another distribution thing, it's in Amazon. So it's very small, but like that. It's somehow what I find that is a little bit positive, even though it's not perfect, is that all these little showings help for the next movie to happen. No, when I say that I got distribution, that means that they pay a little bit for it. So that money goes for the next movie, like in a little can, you put the money, and little by little it accumulates. So that allows for a little shooting next, no? That's how Isabela was done, and that's why it needed time to get more money, because I don't know, there was a retrospective in Paris of all the movies. So that gave me money, and that money, half of it helped the production of part of the first shooting. So yeah, it's limited, but I like this idea. And at the end and also we with Melanie Shapiro, that is the producer of the films, we somehow keep control. We don't have a sales agent, for instance, that would keep half, to say the least, of what the little things that you earn, you know. So having that control, that there's no people in the middle, also helps for the money to come directly to us, and we redirect it to this little can. So even though it's small, it's enough for this sort of production for now. I think it's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nico. Thank you for staying. Thanks so much for coming and for being here. Thanks, Nico. Thanks, Janet.